So this is the outline of the presentation I gave on my master thesis. I'm going to follow that again today. I'm going to quickly state the problem and then talk about professionalization, occupational transition, meaning sign language interpreters transitioning into academia. I will show some of my data and explain my research methodology, explain the findings, and then hopefully lead into a discussion with all of you before, and then also have a conclusion on just the data I used in my thesis. So I do call it problem statement. In the EUMASLI program, you obviously have to do a master thesis in the end, but that question that was in my head actually was not just the motivation for a thesis, but more general, as in I was one of the first to study sign language interpreting in Germany. So 25, 30 years nearly into the professionalization process in Germany. We do now have several programs at university level, programs where you can become a sign language interpreter. But until this day, we have one single doctoral degree that has been completed in Germany. So it seems that pathways into academia are either unavailable or inaccessible. And there also might be individual reasons why people do not start a PhD. Now you wonder why that is important. Let's talk about professionalization for a minute. We all know interpreting is a very old practice and has occurred for centuries. But the development of a practice into a profession has to follow certain phases, certain traits have to be accomplished. And also professionalization is not an acquired end state, but it's a dynamic process. Now, when we look at sign language interpreting, we know that we now have many programs on academic level, which means academization. And that needs collective actions to elaborate a profession on that level. But we do have a circle of academization, means also integrating academic knowledge. And like I said, many countries, meaning many European countries, not all countries in the world, now do have a range of systems where you can be educated as a sign language interpreter. But knowing that those programs also need personnel, staff, teachers, you do need, at most universities now, the staff to have a doctoral degree themselves. So when we look specifically at Germany, we know the professionalization began in the 1970s. For deaf interpreters a little later, they had their first study program starting in in 2011. And so the first university program for sign language interpreters started in 1995. But I think it's fair to say that sign language interpreting has not received sufficient attention in Germany. So the so-called contribution to systematic body of knowledge is missing, which is also part of the professionalization process. And if you look at this in a wider view, there is the need for a circle of empowerment, as in research, that research then being taught in education and then used in practice, and the practice again reflecting on certain topics, and the cycle with research starting again. Now, when it comes to occupation and transition, we know we already have so-called practice searchers in the field, which are practitioners who also do research. So we do have a wealth of practical knowledge in our field, in all of our countries. The contribution of practitioners is certainly critical to the growing scholarship in the field. But when you look at academia again, at university programs, So for Germany, we have a few programs now, meaning there are a few full-time positions. And in those programs, you do not only teach, but you also do research. But again, if you want to teach in academia, one of the necessities is having a PhD. If you want to teach at a higher level, full-time, fully paid. So starting a doctoral study as a former practitioner is called an occupational transition. Just some theoretical background, an occupational transition is taking place in many forms. It can be a process changing from one occupation to another. It can just be a change in job roles. So the understanding in my thesis was that the transition takes place from being a sole practitioner to academia, which does not mean it's either terminated or that you do not work as a practitioner anymore. Now, in that transition, certain factors are either facilitating or hindering. And I did put those factors on different levels, so to speak. The macro level, I call it the environmental or societal level. Certain factors on that level impacting maybe that transition. Then you come a little closer, let's call it meso-level, structural impacting factors, structural meaning academia as its structure, is that hindering or facilitating? And then also personal factors, individual factors are either hindering or facilitating. I will come back to this later, and I will pick just a few for the presentation today. As I always say, if you're interested in more, please read my thesis. Just reach out to me. So the research question in my thesis was, what are facilitating and what are hindering factors in the occupational transition of a sign language interpreter into academia?
Anja, slow 1 second.
Go ahead. I am so sorry. You know that. Us sign language interpreters, when we get to speak, we're way too fast. I really am sorry. So, some information about my data and my research methodology. I had 2 focus groups where I was collecting data. One with participants who were in the process of writing a PhD, and one with practitioners who had seriously thought about taking that step, but until this day refrained from it. So the first one, the participants I found by the so-called purposive or judgment sampling, and the second one by snowball. They all had a brief information about the data collection and the use of the data and signed a consent form. Like I said, focus groups, which is called qualitative methodology. But I also use quantitative method. I use a survey to collect demographic information concerning age, gender, educational path, and specifically grid, which I would talk about in a second again. I did both focus groups on Zoom, which helped me collect the data. I did audio files, and then I could use an external transcriber. The focus groups took place in German. And then the relevant parts for the thesis, which was in English, I translated myself. I used thematic analysis. So because of all the reading, you do have a literature review in the thesis part. I had key categories determined prior to the data collection, but also thematic analysis enables you or the data to have other themes come out of the data that you can then additionally use. I did not use an independent external coder. So before I present some findings, I can say that all possible impacts I had found in the literature were confirmed by data. Going back to the circles as in macro, meso, micro level, all participants acknowledged environmental, which was the outer, the macro level, and also structural factors, but structural factors were experienced as the most either hindering or facilitating, but also the motivational values, which was on the inner circle, on the micro level, came out as a very strong theme. So what are environmental and societal possible impacting factors? When we talk about our field, ideologies come up a lot, as in, oh, sign language, is that really a language? Connected to that, oh, is that really a full-time occupation you have? So along that line, people obviously think there is no need for research in our field. Like, why would you do a PhD in that field? A little broader thinking, interpreting in general is viewed as a service or helping profession. So again, the question is, why do we need to do research in that field? But then we also have in each country, so the first two ones are pretty much in general for all of us. But then specifically, the third reason are very country related, as in what policies do we have? What are the politics concerning our working language, our occupation? And even the fourth factor, what is the legislation that can impact us in this specific decision? So speaking about Germany again, we have a very regulated profession, which means we pretty much get paid the same hourly amount in every field we work in. And that is also experience related. So there is a missing incentive. Why would you do a PhD if you get paid the same as someone who is just done a bachelor? And you could see that in the data, participants pretty from their own view, their own experience, and confirmed that, as in still having to handle a lot of prejudice towards deaf people, towards sign language, and feeling stigmatized. And at the same time, we're very strongly considering their relationship to the deaf community, as in, we know the sign language is not acknowledged as a full language everywhere, and deaf people have so many barriers. How can I, the privileged one, even be considering doing a PhD when I know so many deaf people and other people have no chance for upward mobility to do a PhD, to study at all? But at the same time, there's a strong support. So that was a bit split, as in being very conscious and not considering to go further because of what deaf people might think, but at the same time, specifically stating the support by deaf people when someone had announced considering doing a PhD. One thing we also have to consider, and we again means the field of interpreting in general, we are a predominantly female field. So even though it's 2024, the view towards women compared to men are still, well, don't you, well, why do you need to do a PhD? Don't you have family? Don't you want to rather raise your kids? Those questions still happen. And it's also been proven by research that women in female-dominated occupations are more likely to be married and have children than women who seek an occupation in a male-dominated field. And research also confirmed that there is a significant correlation between partnership and promotion intention, as in having a lower intention to do a PhD when you're in a stable, in a committed relationship. So the gender factor was confirmed again in the focus groups, that women are still confronted with thoughts of being worth less, or like our thought, our thinking, our opinion not being valued as much. But at the same time, and that's why I really appreciate thematic analysis, ageism as a topic came through, which I hadn't considered before. As a female-dominated profession, and if you are married and have children, the idea of doing a PhD might come in later, not right after studying, but at a later age. But then you're confronted with ageism in the society, as in, why do you need to do a PhD now in your 40s or 50s? Aren't you taking a spot from someone who is younger and could then go on and then have an academic career? Now, when we look at the next level, closer in structural impacting factors, we all know we are a practical profession. So that means while studying, the perception is also that the program is getting us ready to do practical work then. The majority of practitioners in Germany, when I asked them in a pilot study before my thesis, said they never seriously considered an academic career. No one had ever asked them. There were no programs for that. There were no structure. So the idea obviously was you finish, you start working as a sign language interpreter, and that's it. But that is something general for the field of interpreting, and that is a global perception, that theory and practice is perceived as something split, the dichotomy of it. And it is often taught separately, but we have to think it more together, because, I mean, we can just do our practical work with a theoretical foundation, but at the same time, our practical work is changing every day. So we need new research because it's developing. So we always need to have practice and theory go hand in hand. And it's also now, and I don't know if that's a problem of our profession or also a problem of the Bologna process. We have a lot of first level programs, as in ending with the BA. And the approach is already to have generalistic sign language interpreters who are capable of working in all settings. So the focus is on practice. And speaking for Germany, in most programs, you only have to have a little knowledge of sign language interpreting. So in a BA program in 3.5 years, you have to learn a lot. You have to develop your knowledge and your skills. So the research part kind of is the tiny part, the addition that is necessary, because you have to earn a BA, so you need to write a thesis. But in retrospect, most practitioners say they do not feel capable of doing research. So that was again confirmed in both focus groups, that when people were studying, it was never a matter of continuing. And even though for those few where someone had said, well, do you consider, there was no structure in Germany so far. There are no programs, there are no, like, if you would start this, you would be on your own. And also people feel they don't have the skills to do research. Those came a bit short in studying on a BA level. Let's imagine one moves on nevertheless. What is really important is academic guidance. We are talking about guidance in our practical profession as well, as in having a mentor, doing internships. you cannot just be thrown into the deep end and expect to swim on your own. So it's the same for academia, obviously. You need academic guidance. You need someone explaining to you the new world with its new language, different structure. And also, you need support, maybe not by the superiors, but maybe by the head of the department, by someone acknowledging, especially when you transition from being a practitioner, you do come from a height of knowledge, of experience, and you kind of fall into a valley of not knowing the ropes and not having the skills. So acknowledging that and guiding someone, introducing someone into the new world, that is very important. It's called socialization. That can be either by a single person as a mentor or a tutor, or by a full department. Again, that was confirmed in the data that if you do not have academic guidance, you have this constant lack of understanding, as in you're trying to explain your frustration or let's call it dissatisfaction, and it's not really understood because it's a special process from coming from the practical world as a practitioner, transitioning into academia. And if you're there by yourself, it can be, and it was called tedious. It's hard work. And what we have to understand is it is also a loss of time that is needed for doing research, because we're still an emerging profession. We still have so many research questions unanswered. So if we could find ways to give more guidance to those pioneers, let's call them, in most countries. I know some countries I have, like the America, United States of America, they have one PhD program at Gallaudet. There are a lot of PhDs coming out in the UK now, so there's a little more structure. But for countries like Germany, and I assume also Ireland, and I don't know what other countries you are from today, but we have to think about other ways to give academic guidance. Now, just a quick look at the inner circle. I mean, that's the most obvious one. You have to have, for example, you have to have a special motivation, one that is taking you through, we're talking years, 3 to 5 to 10 years of doing a PhD study. But there are different motivational values. And that is really interesting, because it can be that, for example, one motivational value is power and achievement, as in the PhD is the step of then, for example, going for a position as a professor or as someone else in and then educating. But it can also be a motivational value, as in I want to learn more. The way is the goal. I want to ask questions. I want to find answers. It was in the research concerning sign language interpreters, so our profession, it was found that certain personality traits are very helpful in becoming a sign language interpreter. For example, having a solid self-esteem, but also openness to experience. Now, it would be interesting to find out if the same personality traits are helpful in then the transitioning of a sign language interpreter to becoming a PhD student. Contentiousness was another personality trait, as in striving for achievement, and so is grit, meaning really going for the long term, the long goal, not accepting setbacks, or accepting setbacks, but still going for the long term. Again, most of those personality traits and motivational underlying values were confirmed in the data, that the motivation is the most important foundation for going through the process. Especially this one saying, and I think that is important. I'm sorry, there's just someone coming in. Give me a second. So we have one person finally in the room, and the rest of us, of you, are all online. Thinking about us interpreters, always like processing thoughts, knowledge. It's juggling information, so to speak, and this is our channel for, I mean, us asking the question, finding the answer. So going back to this, the several impacting factors, these are just some. I'm pretty sure many more are relevant, maybe just so, for one individual person, but maybe for more people. And that's why I like to talk about this. And I know there are some PhD students here online, and at least one person who has finished a PhD. So I'm eager to know, are these facilitating factors you have experienced? What are others? What have you seen along your journey? So coming to the conclusion, yes, the findings of my study supported the assumption that pathways into academia in Germany are either not readily available or even inaccessible. But there was one topic that came out strongly and that made me think the most, the topic of identity and of belonging. And I've not heard anyone talking about this. So maybe we have to think more about it as a profession also. When we are sign language interpreters, and we are part of this profession for many years, and then transition, the experience that was shared with me was this: you are kind of in between now. You do not fully belong to academia, but you also, you feel you belong to the practitioners, but they see you as someone different, as an alien kind of. So you feel lonely. And I think this is something for all of us to think about, because we need PhD studies to be going on. We need the research. We as practitioners, we need the answers. But at the same time, they need us. They need us for the comfort. They need us to feel they fully belong to us, because the transitioning part is also impacting the identity. And I think that is another overlaying process that can cause stress maybe, or again, steal time from the actual research. The PhD students in my focus group, they talked about using creative ideas to kind of make their way through, because the structure was rather hindering than facilitating. So they did find individual solutions to problems. But I think, again, if we have a broader exchange, a global exchange even, why does everyone, again, have to find solutions? So maybe our field does not have the structure yet, as in programs. So it's more individual solutions, but in an exchange, it can also be an exchange of best practice, so to speak. Obviously, universities also still needed to take an active role, promote more research, and also provide systematic offerings to young researcher, but it's a joint effort. It's us, the practice, it's universities, it's the associations. We all have an interest in research happening. So we can provide space for the exchange of experiences, the exchange of data, like today. I'm really grateful for this opportunity given to me and to be in contact with you to exchange about the data I found, your experiences, and let's take it further from here. Also, we're not in this by ourselves. University in many countries is driven by this neoliberal impact, as in higher, faster, better, and it's not fitting for every person. It's also not fitting for us when you consider we come from the practice, we are staying connected to practice, and in many countries you have to, because no structure also means no payment. So if you're not getting paid in a PhD position, you will have to keep working as an interpreter. And again, female-dominated profession, many of us have children. So you have children, you work, you do your PhD. We need to connect to this movement called slow scholarship. It has to be slower, it has to be on our terms. We might need different avenues, different spaces. So let's explore opportunities together. This is just a very small puzzle piece to research in general, but also to the bigger question of career. I said I was one of the first cohort in Germany. So we have not yet have practitioners go through the full career as a sign language interpreter, meaning studying until retirement, working as a sign language interpreter. We have no role models. So what is our career path looking like? Are we just going to be sign language interpreters forever? Can doing a PhD in between be something one step of the ladder? Because that was confirmed in the data as well. Doing a PhD makes us also a better interpreter, because we find answers to the questions, we take them back to our practice as well. And can we, I don't know, be practitioners, researchers, and teachers at the same time? It's not going to be fitting for everyone, but can it be a career avenue for some? And can we facilitate that maybe? So I might look into that in a PhD one day. You never know, but you might, or someone else. Let's see. So that's one puzzle piece. Just quickly about the limitations of my thesis or of my study. Positionality, very important. Obviously, research is never completely neutral, but it does reflect also the researcher's personal interest and values and assumptions. So maybe you could ask, was I too close in my thesis on my data? Also, population-wise, the sample size of participants in my study in both focus groups was relatively small, and it also lacked diversity. So I would hope that someone is maybe working with the same research question again in a different country or with a different population. And then, like I said, broadness, it's just one single puzzle piece, but it's needed, and we will all hopefully keep doing research. So thank you. Also, I can send you this if you want to read more about this, all the different references I've used. I am done with my presentation, and it's really weird because I can't see you. I can just see a black camera eye on the ceiling.
So Caroline got her copy of your thesis. Catherine White says that there's been a lot of food for thought and continued food for thought. You want to go this?
Well, now, we have booked this session for 2 hours. I'm done with my presentation. So either I'm asking you now, do you have general question? And the idea is also to send you in breakout rooms, to have you discuss your experience and to come back with experience or more questions.
He's just saying he's gonna stop the recording.
Thank you. It's ISL. I don't understand it. ISL, I'm sorry.
Oh, maybe I misunderstood. Can you go into English because I can't hear?